Welcome into Outkick the Show. I know I'm super early today, but a couple of important reasons why that is the case. I am solo with my 4-year-old. No lock it in this week. So he and I are going to see Toy Story 4 here in a couple of hours. And I want to make sure that I've got all my work done by the time I leave to go watch Toy Story 4 with my 4-year-old. My wife is in Omaha, Nebraska right now with one of our kids for the College World Series. The other kid is in summer camp, so it's just me and the 4-year-old around the house. This is a great quote from my 4-year-old. This is 100% true. Yesterday, I picked him up at swim school in the afternoon. And when I picked him up, I said, okay, it's just you and Dad. And I want to make sure that I quote him correctly when I read this. But when I told my 4-year-old that it was just going to be me and him in the house for the next couple of days, he said, and I quote, "Important question, Dad. Do you have any idea how things work around here?" The answer, of course, is no. But as I told him, just between us, as long as your mom doesn't hear about anything that goes on, she'll think everything was perfect. And by the way, one of my kids is really ride or die. I swear to God, this happened. I think I've talked about this before. We had a snowstorm, and what counts as a snowstorm in Nashville, and I was out driving with my middle son. He was 6 years old at the time. We started spinning on ice, right? Started spinning on ice and hit a tree. Not going very fast, going like 5 miles an hour, but it was very obvious that the front of the car was dented. And there was issues, parts of the car had fallen off. And I get out of the car and I say, "Oh man, your mom," because my wife had said, "Hey, you shouldn't go driving right now. It's snowing a little bit. You know, you're not good at driving in the snow." And immediately we spin out and I slide into a tree and do like $2,000 in damage to the car. So I swear to God, I get back in the car and I said, "Man, this is a mess. You know, like we hit that tree. We're gonna have to get it fixed. We're never gonna hear the end of this from your mom." And I swear to God, my middle son immediately says, "Just don't tell her, Dad." And I said, "We just hit a tree. The front of the car is indented. There's major issues here that she's going to recognize." He said, "Just don't tell her, Dad. That kid is going to be ride or die, but he's also going to be big-time trouble when he gets to be a teenager." I wish you could have seen his face when he said, "Just don't tell her, Dad. Just don't tell her, Dad." It was an incredible immediate response. This kid's going to grow up, deny. He's going to be incredible. All right, we got a bunch to get to here. I want to start with this Megan Rapinoe story. If you haven't heard, yesterday Megan Rapinoe was asked whether she was excited about the opportunity to go to the White House in the event the U.S. women win the World Cup. Now, this is clearly a setup question that a media member is asking Megan Rapinoe, and Rapinoe immediately responds, "I'm not going to go to the fucking White House." Now, I'm putting the full word in there. We might need to bleep it out when we share the clip, but I think it's important that you know she didn't say effing White House. She said, "I'm not going to go to the fucking White House." And then she followed it up by saying, "But Donald Trump's not going to invite us anyway," effectively. Now, I want to dissect this statement because I think it's a big and interesting story, especially this time of year as the U.S. women get prepared to play their quarterfinal match against France. First, let's start here and just talk about the impact of a statement like this outside of the world of politics, entirely on the pitch, soccer related. The U.S. women were very fortunate to beat Spain 2-1. They were rewarded a penalty kick in the 75th minute that they didn't deserve. Megan Rapinoe scored both goals. They were both penalty kicks. Absent penalty kicks, the U.S. women didn't score. So the U.S. women did not play well against Spain to begin with. When you are addressing a question like this purely from a sports perspective, you are providing a lot of incentive to whoever you are going to play against because you are jumping past the game against France, the game in the semifinals, and the game in the championship, and already talking about what will happen if you win a championship. She is a team captain. The easy way to answer a question like that should be pretty straightforward. Look, I'm not worried about what's going to happen if we win the World Cup. I'm worried about getting ready for France on Friday. That's the answer that a team captain should give in this situation. Because whether or not you get an invite to the White House is almost entirely, in her mind at that point in time, predicated on actually going out and winning the Women's World Cup. Now, in 2015, the U.S. women won and went to the White House and met Barack Obama. Okay, so there is a precedent that certainly they would be invited, but purely from a soccer on-the-field perspective, this is a little bit, I think, providing bulletin board material to whoever you're playing against, much like a quote right before the Spain game. One of the U.S. women came out and said, I don't just think we're the best team in the world, I think we're the best team in the world and the second best team in the world. All right, that's cocky. You can say it. I don't think it's smart. I don't think when you're about to play in a foreign country against a team like France that is the second most likely to win a championship, you want to be looking ahead beyond the round of 8, beyond the round of 4, all the way to winning the championship and make some sort of political statement. Now, so that's my first analysis of the Megan Rapinoe statement that is entirely on the field, soccer related, okay? I don't think it's a smart comment there. Second part, let's talk about just the U.S. Women's Soccer Federation. Right now, you are Megan Rapinoe, and you are arguing as part of a lawsuit that is currently in mediation that the U.S. women deserve more money. That you deserve more money, more equal pay compared to the U.S. men. If you want to get that result, what do you need to change current situations? Allies. You need to find people who will support you and will agree with you that you deserve more money to represent the U.S. women's national team. What is the number one way to hurt your chances of getting more money? By attacking half of the country that supports Donald Trump and may well love the U.S. women's soccer team. Furthermore, point 3, Megan Rapinoe and the U.S. women's soccer team talk a great deal about how important it is for them to represent all sorts of little girls all over America. Great for them. I agree. Young girls, women's soccer players have flocked to support the U.S. women's soccer team. Do you really need to drop an F-bomb in answering this question? I'm not going to go to the fucking White House. She could have just said, I'm not going to go to the White House. Still a bad answer, right? The answer that she should give, in my opinion, right now, just plenty of time to make political statements. If I were her, and I'm an opinionated guy, I would have responded to that question, which is clearly trying to create a news story, by saying, you know what? I'm not even worried about politics right now. I'm worried about France. I'm worried that if we're fortunate enough to get past France, we didn't play very well against Spain. We got to get a lot of stuff corrected. If we're fortunate enough to get it past France, I'll worry about who we play then. And then if we beat them, I'll worry about winning the World Cup. What we do after we win the World Cup is totally outside of my mind. I am so focused on each of these games that I'm not paying attention to anything else. Ask me that question after we win the World Cup, and I'll be able to answer it then. Boom. You still get the opportunity to make the exact same political statement you want to make, but you wait until you've actually won the Women's World Cup to make it, instead of saying it in the middle of this process. And I can't even imagine what it's going to be like when they have their next media availability in France, because the president has now responded. And in the wake of the Megan Rapinoe comments, let's talk about what the president said. I thought that the president actually handled this pretty well. I'm going to read directly from his tweets. Women's soccer player Megan Rapinoe just stated she is not going to the effing White House if we win. Other than the NBA, which now refuses to call owners owners, leagues and teams love coming to the White House. I am a big fan of the American team and women's soccer. but Meghan should win first before she talks. Finish the job. We haven't yet invited Meghan or the team, but I am now inviting the team, all caps, win or lose. Meghan should never disrespect our country, the White House, or our flag, especially since so much has been done for her and the team. Be proud of the flag that you wear. The USA is doing great. I actually think that's an incredibly magnanimous tweet from Donald Trump. What's the number one criticism of sports media members when Donald Trump gets into feuds? That he's not presidential enough. Think about what Trump did in that tweet. He said what Megan Rapinoe said was an unsolicited attack on him. He responded by saying, you know what? I think she should focus on trying to win the tournament instead of worrying about the White House or me. But I hope the U.S. women win. I am a fan, and I'm going to invite them to the White House whether they win or lose. This is checkmate for Donald Trump. He makes Megan Rapinoe look bad here. He makes her look like the unsophisticated, angry, uncouth American, and amazingly, Donald Trump comes off as the adult in the room here. Now, some people are going to say, well, he should never be responding to Megan Rapinoe in the first place. Trump has proven that if you attack him and you have a prominent voice and it receives a lot of attention, and this was and is going to be the number one story in the world of sports today, that he doesn't just ignore that stuff. That's not his brand. That's not his personality. You or I may disagree about the president deciding to get involved in as many fights as he does, particularly in the social media universe, but that is where I think Donald Trump feels most alive. If anything, I actually applaud Donald Trump for the way he responded here, because I think he responded in a really smart, intelligent, and fairly complimentary manner. So I think that Megan Rapinoe looks bad here, and again, I think she looks bad on the field. I think she looks bad in the larger universe as she's advocating for more rights for U.S. women. I also think she looks bad in the context of I'm representing all these little girls all over the country when she drops the F-bomb while insulting the idea of the White House. Now, let me talk about this also. And I also think Trump looks good. I think this is a larger story, though, because there's a difference between a pro athlete deciding not to go to the White House and a member of the U.S. national team insulting the president and the White House while she or he is representing the U.S. national team. As a preliminary, if I were ever invited to the White House, whether it was by a Democrat, whether it was by a Republican, whether it was by an independent, to meet the President of the United States, I would go. On my radio show this morning, Eddie Garcia, our update guy, said, you know what? Richard Nixon is the most controversial president, really, of the last 50 years. He's been dead now for a while. He hasn't been president since he resigned during Watergate. Today, 50 years later, if you meet Richard Nixon and you tell people that you met Richard Nixon in the White House, people don't say, oh my God, I can't believe you shook Richard Nixon's hand. They immediately say, oh wow, how did that go? What was he like? What was the day like in the White House? The idea that 50 years from now, people are going to be like, oh my God, you shook Donald Trump's hand, you awful human being. Nobody is going to make that argument. Nobody with a reasonable mind. I feel confident in my knowledge of history that that is not what is going to transpire here, okay? So I would go, and I think any American should consider it to be an incredible honor to be invited to the White House for any reason to meet the president. Whether it was Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George Bush, George W. Bush, I would go for all of them. I would be thrilled at the opportunity, okay? I think that's the way most Americans really do feel. Even if you disagree with some of the things that the person is doing in the White House right now, you shouldn't be rooting for the president to fail, because in order for the president to fail, the country would also have to be failing. Whether you love or hate Donald Trump, the stock market's at an all-time high. We are not engaged right now in any really, really dangerous war. It's not like he's taken us to war in Iraq yet. like George W. Bush did, and the unemployment rate is at an all-time low for virtually every race, and the per capita income rate is at an all-time high. So things have never been better in this country from an economic perspective. I don't get triggered by the tweets that Donald Trump sends out. Do I agree with everything he says? No. But I've never agreed with everything any president said. The only president I would agree with 100% of the time is me, and I'm not even sure I'd agree with 100% of the decisions that I made if I were fortunate enough one day to be president. So, there is a difference, however, between turning down an invite to the White House, in my opinion, if you are a member of the New England Patriots or the Boston Red Sox or the Golden State Warriors or any team that has won a title recently, and turning down an invite to the White House when you play for the United States national team. If you play for the United States national team, you are carrying the mantle of the president and the government as well. That's literally the job. That's why the U.S. Soccer Federation has mandated that Megan Rapinoe has to stand for the national anthem. She is executing her own protest by not putting her hand over her heart and not singing along with the national anthem, because she has what I believe a lot of people have called Trump derangement syndrome. She has bought into the idea that Donald Trump is pure evil, and somehow if she does anything like talk to him, she's making things worse. And this, to me, is a big part of the issue that I have with American society today. I praise Joe Biden on Twitter because he came out and said, you know what, I worked with people who were segregationists that I didn't agree with, and we got things done in the Senate, even if we disagreed fundamentally on many issues. That's what real life is. You don't isolate yourself in the corner and refuse to interact with people who disagree with you. You roll up your sleeves, try to find things that you agree with each other on, and try to make the country overall better. There are innumerable individuals that I have huge differences about from a political perspective that are really good friends of mine. That's how the country should be. We disagree on this. Maybe we can still agree on this. Most of us are not binary. We don't assume that everything the Democrats do is great. We don't assume that everything the Republicans do is awful, and vice versa. Most of us have overlapping political interests. What Megan Rapinoe's response represents to me is a fundamental repudiation of everything that is other than her perspective, right? And I just don't think that's a healthy way to live in this country. I applaud Donald Trump for inviting the U.S. women to the White House, for saying he's a fan of the team, for saying he's going to bring them in, win or lose, and for actually not taking Rapinoe's hate and actually responding to it with some class and decorum. They may not go. I don't care if they go or not. I think the invite is a win for Donald Trump from a political perspective, because I think if they don't show up, it's an indictment more of the U.S. women's team than it is of Donald Trump. And I think in this story, Donald Trump made Megan Rapinoe look small, and he actually lived up to the office of the presidency in the way he responded to her insult. So that is the way that I would think. Also, let me say this about Megan Rapinoe. She's evidently gay, and she considers everything Donald Trump has done to be an insult to gay people. This is just laughably absurd. Trump is the most liberal on gay rights issues to ever be elected to a first term in the history of the United States. He's more liberal than Barack Obama was in 2008. He's more liberal than Hillary Clinton was when she ran for president and lost to Barack Obama. The issue of gay rights has been decided. Donald Trump is the first president in his first term to not try and combat gay marriage, to actually support it as the law of the land. This is why I have said for a long time that if you actually look at Trump's policies as opposed to getting triggered by his tweets, he's not a traditional Republican by any stretch of the imagination, and he's not actually that conservative, certainly not from a social perspective. Donald Trump was a Democrat for most of his life, And his platform, other than immigration, where he obviously is very aggressive and believes we have to get something fixed on the border, newsflash, we do. Regardless of what political party you represent, the status of the situation on our border is untenable. And the government has to figure out through Congress and the Senate how in the world to find a tenable solution so that we're not encouraging people to take young kids and try to travel 1,000 miles with them to get to the border. I mean, regardless of your politics, it's an untenable situation. So I just think it's a bad look for Megan Rapinoe. I think it's a bad look for the U.S. women's soccer team. And if they lose now, she's going to open herself up to the criticism that the reason why they lost was because they weren't focused on the opponent. They were too busy through the captain of their team trying to make a statement about politics instead of trying to go out and kick some ass in the world of soccer. All right, couple of other things. Vandy versus Michigan. What a game last night. I absolutely loved it. Kumar Rocker is a rock star, all right? Kumar Rocker, 15 and a third innings pitched with Vanderbilt facing elimination. He has struck out 30 in those 2 games. He has only allowed 3 hits, and he's only allowed 1 earned run. He's a true freshman. Took the ball against Duke with Vandy threatened and potentially about to lose. Then he went out against Michigan and absolutely dominated last night. Kept Michigan off the scoreboard while he was on the mound. He took responsibility for 1 run that scored after his reliever came in that was already on second base. This was, I think, a big-time win. I love the College World Series. My wife is there. My middle son is there. As I said earlier, starting this show, I loved the amount of support that the University of Michigan was showing for their team. I also love the amount of support that that Vanderbilt was showing. My wife, wildly, is a alum of both schools, Michigan and Vanderbilt, and those are the only 2 schools she's graduated from. She has cast her lot with Vanderbilt. We're fans of Tim and Maggie Corbin. Great people. The Vanderbilt University is lucky to have them. I want to give props to James Franklin and his wife Fumi for both being there with their kids, watching these games, because the relationship between Tim Corbin and James Franklin is very strong. I'll tell you a story. When Penn State lost last year to Ohio State, tough loss. Penn State was up late. Ohio State got 2 late touchdowns. Second straight tough loss in a row for Penn State to Ohio State. I was up there with my wife. We went to go watch the game. And after the game, went downstairs into the locker room area. And who's standing there with James Franklin but Tim Corbin? Tim Corbin, James Franklin, very good friends. And Franklin has tried to learn from Corbin, and Corbin has tried to learn from Franklin, vice versa. They're really good dudes, both of them. I like them a lot, but I think it speaks well to James Franklin that even now that he's at Penn State, he's still traveling in his free time, not just by himself, but also with his family to support the Vanderbilt baseball program because of he and his family's relationship with the Corbins and what they have meant to Vanderbilt. I just think that's a great story. I think Vandy gets it done tonight. I'm excited to watch it. Like I said, I'm going to Toy Story 4 with my 4-year-old, wild early afternoon, coming back home, kicking back, putting up my feet, watching Game 3 of the College World Series. If you have not watched it yet, it's been a lot of fun. And by the way, I want to give a shout-out to Chris Budden. Used to do local news in Knoxville, also worked with us at Fox. She has been in the dugout for all these games, been in Omaha for 2 weeks. She's done an incredible job. I watch a lot of College World Series games because there's not a lot of other sports on television at this time. I think she did a phenomenal job. May also flip up a bit and watch the Democratic presidential debate, but I would have watched the whole thing. But if the Vanderbilt-Michigan game's going on, I'm not going to bother flipping up and watching it, even though I am intrigued to see how it goes. I think the Democratic presidential race, in my opinion, is already down to like 4 people. I think it's down to Joe Biden, to Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Mayor Pete. And I think ultimately this battle is going to come down to Joe Biden against Elizabeth Warren for the nomination. I think Biden is the best nominee the Democrats can put forward, but I think the final 2, I think Warren is going to pass Bernie, and I think it's going to be Warren against Joe Biden down the stretch to see who is actually going to be the nominee. I think Biden is the better choice, but I think it's going to be Warren against Biden to see what exactly ends up happening there. Finally, NBA free agent news, lots of different rumors, lots of drama. We'll know maybe some stories by Friday at 6 Eastern when NBA free agency officially begins. But both Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant have opted out of their player option for one additional season. They want to get multi-year deals with as much money on the table as they possibly can. This is not a huge surprise. I remain of the belief that Klay and Durant are both going to go back to Golden State and sign multi-year extensions, but we will have to wait and see exactly what ends up happening there. At a minimum, I would be stunned if both leave. I think Klay Thompson will be back in Golden State. I think again, Kevin Durant a little bit more uncertain, but I think his best move is to stay at Golden State. All right, I appreciate all of you. My name is Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. We'll probably be live tomorrow. I may go live tomorrow after the Democratic presidential debate and give you a primetime Outkick. Regardless, I appreciate all of you. Thank you for hanging out. If you haven't already, go listen to my conversation with Paul Feinbaum. He is our podcast guest this week. It is outstanding. I love all of you. Kisses, DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. This has been Outkick the Show. See y'all. See you at Facebook. Love you guys.